Self-improvement in its current form online is mentally castrating us. And I fell victim to it. And I didn't realize until I was able to take about 3 to 6 months away from social media, at least in the capacity that I was consuming it, and really get into my own professional life in terms of operating a company and everything else at the level that I have. And I don't mean it's mentally castrating us as like a surface level clickbaity term. I mean it in the deepest, most psychological sense. So we've been led to believe that when we consume this content, that we are growing, we're healing, we're leveling up. And through every platitude, perspective, and feel good piece of content that we come across, what's actually happening is we are amputating the parts of ourselves that make us original, the parts of ourselves that make us dangerous in the sense of who we want to become and the mark that we want to leave on the world, and ultimately what makes us human. And so, what I mean is, everywhere you look, it's hustle porn, it's guru brands, it's inner child healing content recycled in 1,000 different ways. The same goes for the business content out there. And at first, it can feel helpful because you may learn a new perspective and you get insights or things that you didn't know before, right? So that dopamine spike hits in your brain because it's something novel, which is what we crave. But then after a certain period of time, at least from my experience, what happens is then it starts to feel numbing. And so you start finding yourself, you're just clicking on new YouTube channels and you're just passively listening, not really taking in. And then it becomes hollow to where it's just on in the background and you're not even actually paying attention anymore, looking for some kind of escape. And so why does this happen? And in my opinion, it's because none of it is rooted in truth. And I mean that in terms of relative to myself or relative to ourselves, right? The whole thing is rooted in strategy. Content is no longer being shared for the most part. I can't say this for everybody, but content is no longer being shared to enlighten you. It's being shared to extract something from you, your attention, your clicks, your soul, in a sense, if you are not careful and you are not aware of this. And the people posting these things, I think a lot of them genuinely believe that they are being original, right? But they're just repackaging what they heard last week or last month or the thing that they have in their notes into some new way. And so they're just regurgitating it with a slightly different font, maybe a couple different words, a cleaner thumbnail, or maybe a more seductive hook. So we're all becoming slaves to this algorithm or what these massive companies want. And so this isn't to knock people for trying, right? For wanting to do some kind of good in the world. But this is about the sea of sameness that we are now all swimming in, right? And we're fooling ourselves. We're saying what we think is going to grow the algorithm, not necessarily what is going to truly help somebody or what is actually original to us, what is actually built off of our experience. And I don't know about you guys, but I am craving more of the like smaller, less known creators because a lot of time they tend to have more unique perspectives because they've actually lived those parts. But back to people saying what they think is going to grow the algorithm, they're saying these things, but they haven't actually lived the experience. And the craziest part about it is it all works, right? The machine that now is social media and self-improvement, it rewards the mimic. The parrots go viral. That top 1 to 5% of overall people on social media, the loudest ones, are the ones going viral, right? So the algorithm eats this wisdom and then spits out dopamine to everybody else. Or I should say the algorithm eats fake wisdom and then spits out dopamine. And so inside, we're now hollow, right? But we start thinking that we're wise and that fake wisdom is just simply borrowed. It's not actually earned. And that's why so many people are also getting burned by people who are selling a lot of BS courses. And I'm not against courses, but most of them are trash nowadays anyway. And so here's the problem that comes from whenever we try to take advice, because ultimately the core issue here is when we are seeking external advice, right? So advice is entirely contextual. I've made a couple of videos on this, but I can't stress this enough, because the more I've stepped away, the more I realize like the best advice is living through experience and then giving yourself advice. So what worked for somebody else may not necessarily work for you. And this is because they don't know your full context. You are a super complex organism with millions of moving parts. And when you ask somebody else for advice or you search it up on YouTube, that's all, that advice is only going to apply to 0.0000005% of your entire life and what actually makes you. And we tend to just treat those words as black and white and as gospel, because it's hard. It is hard to come up with your own decisions, and it's scary, right? But that is ultimately what is going to build your internal locus of control or your internal wisdom to be able to make proper decisions for you moving forward. The other issue with a lot of advice is their content isn't even necessarily aimed at you. It's aimed at some projected fantasy version of you deep into the future. And instead, what our brains do is, because of that, we don't have to be real with the fact of who we are now. So everybody talks about, like on the business side or content creation side, marketing side, like you have to have an ideal avatar. And so a lot of these creators, they do have an ideal avatar, and it's built into the funnel that they have. And you may think it's for you because you wish it truly was, right? And the classic example I have of this is like when I was making whenever I was making like 5 times less than what I am now, I was taking all this advice from billionaires and hyper successful people, but most of them don't even remember what it's like to be you if they've ever even been in that scenario in the first place. So their advice is no longer relevant to where you are now, because it's very hard to apply because of the amount of leverage that they have. And this really hit me the other day because I saw a tweet or a post on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it, where it was a founder, right? And his target avatar is founders. And the post was something along the lines of he replaced 15 positions with AI in his company. And he goes down and he talks about the 15 different things. And what most of us do is we'll go through that and we'll be like, oh, I got to do all of these things. 2 parts to it. 1, you're probably not a founder. That's his target audience. But 2, he didn't actually do it. His team did. And his team did all the actual actions of building it out because he has the leverage to do it. And then because he didn't actually do it, it's just marketed wisdom, right? It's marketed as wisdom, but it's actually just theater, right? So he didn't actually do any of it. And his mind probably wasn't on it because he had all the leverage of his team. And that's another important thing to know whenever you're listening to these gurus or anything. It's like, how much leverage or how much team do they have building everything out? And how much of it are they just marketing like they did it? Right? And so what that ends up leading to is we get frustrated over and over and over again. And then we start to look at self-improvement as an escape. So most people we're not using self-improvement to evolve. I wasn't for a long time, right? We're using it to hide. It's a more sophisticated version of procrastination, because if you stay in learning mode, you never have to actually face the pain of becoming someone new, of doing things that make you wildly uncomfortable and suck. So, the real transformation is not in like a morning routine or a specific AI marketing strategy or these complex diets or whatever. It's in the death of your current identity. It's grief, resistance, fear. And ultimately what ends up coming out of all that is clarity of who you are. Not because you've necessarily found yourself, but because you have killed the version that was never actually you. That was everybody else's thoughts thrown in to this mixing bowl in your head of how you think you should be. So yeah, self-improvement in its current state is mentally castrating us. And we're cutting off our instincts in the process, our originality, our hunger, our ability to actually think for ourselves. And we're doing it with a smile. That's the worst part. because the content feels good and it feels good to have these aha moments or these fake aha moments, right? But if you really want to grow at some point, what I've noticed for myself in the last few months is you have to stop collecting advice and stop worshiping templates or blueprints of ways of doing things and stop consuming content that replaces your own thoughts. And instead, you have to live in something real where you make a lot of mistakes and you're wrong a lot of the time. But then every single time you're wrong and you reflect on it, you immediately know what you probably should do next time. It's about eliminating things that don't work. It's not about getting it right every single time. So bleed for a goal that is actually yours. Stay obsessed with it. Say things that don't necessarily fit neatly into a carousel and do what scares you even when nobody told you how. We don't need more hyper we don't need more hyper optimized humans. We need more original ones. Burn the blueprint. Stop outsourcing all of your decision makings for what you should do with your life because nobody truly knows it other than you. And it is at that point when you can start to make decisions for yourself that you will truly start to experience who you can be. And every little step along the way, you gain a little bit more confidence in that. You start to find out what actually lights you up instead of what other people are telling you the best way to do things are, because their best way might be your worst way, right? Every every time that you try to have other people tell you exactly what you should do, you're handing the scissors over to the algorithm of social media or other people to prevent you from truly figuring out who you are. And it's slowly cutting pieces from you